Hello and welcome to another episode of the Molten Truth. I am your host, Zoey Michaels. We are officially in season 2. I think this might be episode 4, although I'll be honest, I've lost count. I've interviewed a number of people over the last week. And we are mixing it up this season. We have a variety of people from our book writers to our business owners, and we've got musicians. And today we have Randee Dawn. She is an author and she is someone who has been writing for a very long time, although she waited a little bit later in life, like me, before publishing her first books. Randee, welcome to our show. We are glad to have you here with us, especially since we had to do a little fancy footwork to make sure we could get you in before you had some very exciting travel plans there. So thank you
Yes.
for being here tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So I think when you and I were speaking the other day, you've have you published 2 books in total or just 2 books this year? I don't recall.
Uh, right. So it's two books this year, three books in total in terms of novels. In any case, um, yeah, the most recent one came out in September, and then I had one in April, and then the previous one was originally published in 2022, but then was reissued in 2024. So it's never a simple yes or no answer there.
I get that. And would you like to tell our readers, well, hopefully they're readers too, but our
They could be readers.
listeners, what genre or what type of books do you write?
So I tend to write speculative fiction, which includes science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Primarily, I write the division beneath that. I would say I tend to write more contemporary fantasy. So as if the fantasy is happening in the modern world or a semi-modern world, as opposed to way off in the epic realms of Game of Thrones or something like that, right? But I also sometimes write horror short stories, and I don't think that an author needs to be limited by any one genre. But that's generally the playground I play
Nice. Yeah, we all have things that I think we gravitate toward, but I'm with you. I That's one of the reasons I chose to be an indie author because I never wanted to be locked into one specific genre. One day I might want to write something science fiction. Another day I might want to write something that maybe resembles but is not quite romance. It just kind of depends on what I'm in the mood for with where my imagination takes me, and I love
in.
that
Yeah.
freedom.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I also don't think that anyone should necessarily feel constrained to one genre per book. I think most books have a little bit of a lot of things in there. And there's nothing that says you can't blend fantasy and science fiction if you want to, which is, I did a little bit of that with my most recent book, Leave No Trace. So I think it's a fair game. Whatever the story needs is what you should feel like you should use.
I think you're right. And that keeps it fresh too, I think, for the audiences. I mean, after all, I'm going to go to my other love, music. Music comes up with new blends, and you have the birth of brand new music types that we never heard of a generation or two ago. Why not brand
Hmm.
new book types? So
Exactly. I mean,
we
I
just
immediately flash on David Bowie, who just mixed genres all the time. He was never just a pop star or a rock star or a glitter star or whatever. Bowie would do it all and sometimes do it all multiple times on the same album. So let's all be
exactly.
Bowie.
There you go. I like it. New motto for all of us. Let's all be Bowie.
That's
I
right.
like
I'm
that.
gonna get buttons made. There's a little Bowie in all of us.
I like it. Oh, that's great. So you say you first published your book, the first book you ever published, you were age 50, which you and I have in common because I was also 50 when I published my first books.
Hmm.
Um, but like you, I had been writing all my life. Now, most of my writing was post-it notes and ideas that got started but never finished. And then finally I said, okay, look, I'm finally going to finish and I'm going to get this done. But I'm sure your path took a little, maybe a different slant.
Yeah, I mean, everybody takes a different path. I was writing stories about my stuffed animals when I was very little on scrap paper, and nobody read those. And then when I was in middle school, I started writing a novel, and I would show chapters to my friends, and I would spend my Spanish classes looking like I was taking notes, but actually writing a book.
I
The
love
idea
that.
of writing just kind of, yeah. Well, it looks like you really are being very diligent with your note taking,
Yes.
when in fact, writing a novel, most teachers are not suspecting that that's how you're actually spending your
Yeah.
time.
They're like, wow, she's taking
Um,
on my every word. She is
because
really
look at all these
what a great
notes.
student.
Does one need this many notes for Spanish class? Like, I don't know.
The mischievous person in me loves that.
Yes. And I feel very warm-hearted also that like I was writing these chapters and then my friends would say we want to read the next chapter. I mean, it's not exactly, people slavering down at the docks for Dickens' next book, right? Like which is what they would do back in the day. And Charles Dickens would have a new book and people would be clamoring on the docks for it to arrive on the ship from England. But it was my little version that my friends would be like, "What's the next chapter?" And if they couldn't get the next chapter, we would talk on the phone, and I would read the chapter to them. So like that was just very I was very warm hearted about that. But I think something when I started taking it a little more seriously, I became very shy about the writing in a way that I hadn't been before, and I was just afraid to show it around to a lot of people, and I didn't accept criticism well, and I still have some various scars on my heart from the way that I reacted to some genuinely good-hearted criticism, but just like not the right kind of criticism for me or the genre I wanted to write in. So it just took a long time. And then, life happens and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, this is the thing I've always wanted to do. You better get going on it because life is passing you by. And it wasn't really into my 40s that I started really putting my back into it. I had tons of stuff written. I had fan fiction written. Like it's not like I hadn't had this stuff building up, but I hadn't taken it out and shown it to people and decided that rewrites were necessary and how to do those rewrites and the whole emotional way to separate yourself from your own writing. This is not my ego. This is just a story, right? Um, and when I was in my 40s, I started going to small time, not Comic Con size things, but small time science fiction fantasy conventions and meeting other writers who were doing the same thing I was and learning from them and just becoming gradually more comfortable with taking this stuff out and showing it around. And of course, every time you show a new story to a new person who's very important and who's either going to critique it or potentially publish it, like, of course, you're still nervous.
Mhm.
But once you feel comfortable enough with your writing, you know that even if it's not working for them, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. And and you also have a greater feeling about now I have the tools with which to fix this.
True.
So yeah, so I mean, like, and the thing is, I got an agent, and the agent did not initially get me a publishing deal. It took me writing another 2 books before she got the publishing deal for my first book. So it has to be one of these things when you're a writer that you are willing to not just be committed to writing regularly, but continually pushing that envelope and pushing that door open and pushing and pushing and pushing until somebody says, yes, we actually want that.
Right.
And for some people it happens very quickly, and for some people, like you and me, it takes a lot longer. So you just
True.
never know what the path is going to be.
Absolutely. I think too, a couple things. I love that at the early age you were sharing with your friends and they gave you validation because I think
Mhm.
early on we need that validation from the people in our lives that we trust and that help support us and kind of feed that goal in us. So that I think
Yeah.
validation can be important. Although I know that if we are deep down something we truly want, even without validation, we'll still find a way to do what we truly want to do. But also, when it comes to a story that we want to tell, just because we show it to someone and they maybe don't particularly click with that story doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad story. It just means that maybe they're not the right audience.
Yes.
This is maybe a poor comparison, but I think of a Julia Child and her cookbook and how many, book, places that they tried to get her cookbook and it wasn't the right audience. It wasn't the right audience. It got turned down, but then finally it landed in the right spot because it finally found the right audience. So,
Yeah, and I think that's true about a lot of things in life. Like, it's not just about the thing itself. It's about
mhm.
timing. It's
Yes.
about context. it's about
Hmm.
so many things that are external from the thing, whether it's a piece of artwork or, it's a cookbook or whatever. Um, and it's a lot like, also, it's like, meeting the person that becomes your partner for life. I mean, I
True.
didn't meet my husband until I was in my 40s, my future husband until I was in my 40s either. And we've occasionally talked about, there was a brief period of time where his family might have moved to the same state I was living in, and
Oh,
we
wow.
might have crossed paths. And oh, we could have met so much earlier. And I think to myself, not like that's not a guarantee that we would have clicked. I don't think that there's this one soulmate for life, and there's only one of them out there. And if you don't meet them, there's no other ones for you, right? Like, I very much believe that the person that you're supposed to be with, and not that they're somebody you're supposed to be with, but the person who is right for you
Hmm.
depends on who you are at that time. And we are all different people. Every single day, we are a different person who wakes up. So I don't know that we would have dated if we'd met in our 20s or even younger, right? I wasn't fully baked yet. Nobody's really fully baked when you
True.
hit 20 or 21 or 22, right? Like, I still
True.
like
We
I still
change.
need time in the so in terms of writing and artwork and all that other stuff is very contextual. And I think it's about, I wish I had kind of had that perspective. I don't know if you have to have years on you to understand that perspective truly, but if I could
To
say
date.
anything to somebody who's an upcoming writer or who is nervous about getting their work out there, like, yes, you may have written something that is genuinely not good. That's possible. And that's why you need to revise it and fix it and all that. But for it to find a home with somebody else who is not emotionally involved in your well-being, like, who is not related to you, but who actually has to look at it as a business prospect, which is what a publisher does. That's a different kind of evaluation. And there's so many things that you can't control that go into that valuation, that you have to look at it as, like, just because this thing didn't get published now doesn't mean
Hmm.
it's not going to have a place in the future. And with my new book, Leave No Trace, remember that book I was telling you that I was writing in middle school and like handing out to my friends? Like,
Yeah.
that was that book, believe it or
There
not.
you go.
It wasn't the same book. There's a couple of key things that were very much involved in the book that I was writing in middle school that are still in Leave No Trace now. But I was different, the publishing industry was different, and that's why it had a place now. It just took a very long time and a lot of rewrites and a lot of changing to get to here. But I like to tell people that the book that doesn't work now doesn't mean it's not going to work 10 years, 20
Well,
years, 30 years down the road, right?
right. It's basically the root system. You had the details, the roots of the story, but you had to maybe prune it back, revise, and then let it grow in a whole different direction.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
yeah.
yeah, it's, one of the key things in the story is, for example, so we have this young woman who is, for various reasons, her father has decided that he's going to raise her off the grid in the woods away from normal civilization. And that was a very early thing that I riffed on from a movie that I saw. And I wrote this draft about that young woman. And then there were all these other things that were happening. But that is still in the story. Like, that was something that grabbed me in a very primal way at a young age. And not only does it still affect me in terms of a creative urge, but over all these years, I've spent a lot of time reading survival books. How do you go camping in the woods? What are behavior characteristics of bears? A lot of this, my whole life, here and there, and certainly not every day and every hour, but here and there, I've been investing all of this research time to get to, hopefully, what feels like a real story really taking place in the Rocky Mountains. Um, and isn't just tossed off, oh, she was in the woods and it was scary, right? Like, there's much more depth, I hope, to the version that I ultimately put out. And I had all of this time to just research it. So I,
Yeah.
I, I like to think there's more to it now than there would have been if somebody had come up to me and said, oh, this is a great book, you 20-year-old writer. Let's publish this, right? That would have been a very different book.
Absolutely. And rightly so. With age and experience comes depth. I mean, that's not to say there aren't some prodigies out there who probably have written amazing books at a young age, but I do think our age and experience really does play into the depth of the stories we can tell.
Yes.
So,
I remember
really love
a
the
very early
age.
version of this particular story. I was like, I was so inexperienced with knowing what elements needed to go into a story. I was like, oh, these characters don't need last names. Last names don't tell us anything. Why would you need that? And I was very consciously like, I'm not doing last names on this. And of course, many years later, it's like, you completely understand. You need to know, like important characters, you need to know their last names. You need to know more about them than just the color of their hair and their first name, right? So you just understand that on a more basic level once you're a little bit older, more experienced with
Yeah.
writing in general.
Yeah. Those extra little details, they do matter. They
Yes.
absolutely do. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how our thoughts change as we age, the things we understand, the things that we consider important. It's so
Mhm.
true.
Yeah.
But I think that was something else you and I really had connected over was just kind of the appreciation of our aging, how we got
Yeah.
really comfortable. For me, I think I was more comfortable closer to 50, but I think for you, age 40 was when you were really far more comfortable with being in your own skin. I think is how we phrased that. Just that
Yeah.
extra.
I mean, yeah, it started, I would say, a little bit in my 30s because I just felt more stable and I had a greater awareness of what I wanted and what I didn't want. And then by the time you hit your 40s and your 50s, it's just sort of like, yeah, I don't have time for stuff that just gets in my way. And
Yeah.
it's not that I'm not willing to learn or meet new people or try new things, but I know on an instinctual level, this is what I need from any given experience. And let's see how close I can get to that. And for me, it's also about an awareness of time passing. I think you know that eventually, if all goes well, and when you're 20, 25, that you will get to 50 and 60 and 70. Like if all goes well, right? Like if this project pans out, I will get to those ages, right? But by the time you're in your 50s, you start looking at the things that you're probably not going to get. Um, and
There's some
there's a
truth to
little
that.
sadness in there, and it doesn't mean you can't aspire to them, but there's a pretty good chance that there are many things that I'm simply not going to get done in my lifetime for time or physical reasons or all sorts of things. And for the book publishing, I had made this promise to myself when I was younger that I was going to be a writer and I was going to get things published, and this was like a core value of mine. And to have not done that, if I had never pursued all of this or never chased it as hard as I could, I feel like that would have been a personal letdown of my own self. So it was important for me to start pushing and pushing at it and just take the blows. And by the time I was in my 40s, I was very much more prepared to take whatever disappointments might come along. And also the world changed too. I mean, you know that we can now self-publish. So I figured, well, if nobody really wants this stuff, I'll just self-publish it myself because then it'll be in paper. Nobody can take it away from me, and I will have done a version of this thing I promised myself I was going to do.
Yeah,
And
you're
that made
so
it easier
right.
too.
You're
You
so
know?
right. The tools that we have at our fingertips now, even compared to 10 years ago. Yes. I mean, where even 10 years ago you would have to beg someone, please, read my book, see if you might publish it versus now
Yeah,
that well, if you're not going to do it, I am. We have it so good now. Yeah.
yeah. But it's also really nice too to finally get validation from, again, people who do not have an investment in my emotional well-being, who tell me the book was funny or the book was dark or the book really they appreciated or they got something really out of the book that I had written. They don't have to tell me that. So every time somebody, I love it when a friend or a loved one tells me that, but they sort of, they're kind of obligated on some level to do that.
Yeah.
But when a total stranger tells me that, I just get a glow like nothing else because it means that I've reached somebody that these silly words on the screen that I typed and stared at for so long I made a connection, and that tells me that I'm doing the right thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the greatest compliments a reader can give an author is if they read like one of your books and they're like, "Oh my goodness, this is such a great book." And first of all, they leave a review because that's first of all the biggest compliment. The
Definitely.
second biggest compliment is, "Ooh, what other books do they have that I want to read now?"
Hmm.
I do that when I'm excited by an author's work.
Mhm.
I immediately look for their next book, because if they are a really great writer, I want to know what else they've written that I want to read.
Yes.
These days, I don't have the time, the luxury of sitting down and actually reading. Although if a book is good, if an audiobook is good enough and the others aren't available on audio, I will make the time to read the paper if I have to. But oh my goodness, if I find a book and it's a trilogy and the first one on audio is amazing, then I'm gonna get the next two books. It's a
Hmm.
given. It's an absolute
Yeah.
given.
Yeah.
So
Finding an author that you really respond to and knowing that they have other works out there is very exciting.
exactly. But leaving those reviews is so key, because
Yes.
the compliment of it, and it helps other readers find that author. I
Hmm.
mean, it's just like when it's like leaving a tip at a restaurant for your waitress or whatever the
Yeah.
case. It's that's that equivalent for an author, because if that those reviews are not left, then it makes it harder for future readers to find the author, because of the way that sites like Amazon work, where it pushes authors' books further and further down the search. But by
Hmm.
leaving a review on a book, it pushes it back up the ranks, and makes it more search relevant. So it's
Right.
so helpful to us as authors, for Randee, for myself, for all the writers out there, and the musicians. By all means, please leave reviews. That is the huge compliment for all of us.
Definitely. And the thing that I wrote a blog post about this a couple of years ago about 5 ways to write a review and why your friends keep asking you to do it. I think
Hmm.
that some people who would like to write a review don't know exactly how to do it. They think they have to write like War and Peace or something, but they
Hmm.
don't have to do that. Literally, if you have a sentence that says this was a great book, I loved it. I can't wait to read more from this author. Like that is literally all you have to do. You do not have to do a
Right.
whole summary of the subject or provide every last detail about whether you thought the characterization was good. That is not important. The action is important, and the stars are important. Um, I'll be on to be blunt. Like I don't leave any reviews for people if I can't leave a 5-star review,
Hmm.
because a 4-star review knocks the average so down so quickly that it's
Yeah.
almost like saying I hated it. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of wiggle room between there. 4 is almost like I hate it. 5 is like, oh, thank you so much. I'm glad this book is in my life. And if you
Yeah.
can't, I would say to everybody, please leave just a quick line. But if it can't be like a 5-star review, it's okay. You can let yourself off the hook on this one, because this is not exactly the same thing, but we are getting ready to do a big trip. And I've been looking on Airbnbs, like places I want to stay, where we're going to be going. And I will look at the lowest star ones in case, there's really a problem with this place. But I see
Hmm.
so many people who knock off a star or two on a place. They basically say, this was a nice place. Thanks for having us. But it's 4 stars. I'm like, what are you doing here? Like, if
Right.
you liked it
Yeah.
that much, give it a five. It doesn't cost you anything. Just give it a
Right.
5, right? You know. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's my TED talk on leaving reviews. Please do them. Keep them short. It's totally fine. And please leave the maximum amount you can.
Say, if you're gonna give a bad review, give details, give the reason why.
Yeah, I mean, 1-star
especially
reviews can be
especially on
funny.
Airbnbs.
But all of that said, like as a writer, I
Mm,
heard somebody say this a while ago. Reviews are for readers, not for authors. Like
true.
it is almost impossible that you would actually find a review that was left for you that gave you some sort of writing point that you can then take into your future writing. Like
True.
they're not for you. So I
Yeah.
I can't say I've never read a review. If I see there's a
Mm,
5-star one, I'll be like, ooh, what are they saying? But
yeah.
I'll be honest with you, I don't make it a habit to read reviews, because negative stuff will stick in my head and it will start to slow me down as a writer.
True.
So that's what I try to keep in mind, that they're for the readers who may or may not want your book. They're not for me to give me writing advice or anything like that. And
True.
that makes it
True.
easier to not go peeping.
Yeah. That's a very good advice, especially for newer writers, especially when they're
Mm-hmm.
hung up on trying to get those first 10 reviews or whatever
Mm-hmm.
to get the ball rolling. Yeah. So very important to leave reviews. Ideally, I mean, really only leave a review if you did enjoy the book, and 5-star reviews are the best. It's like giving your waiter a 20% tip versus a 10% tip.
Right.
If it's ten
Yeah,
percent,
exactly.
why bother?
Yeah. I mean, it's okay. It's like, I mean,
Yeah.
yes, I'm sure that the waiter or the server would be very happy to have whatever you want to leave, but
Yep.
yeah, that's
Yep.
that's just generally my
Yep.
take.
Absolutely. It's really it's good feedback. It really is, because the point
Mhm,
is that if you really like the book, that's the point of leaving the review. So others
mhm.
will also be like, "Oh, this is a book worth considering."
Yeah, when I do leave a review, I don't even try to put a whole lot of opinion into it if I can,
Hmm.
unless
Hmm.
something's really bad.
Yeah.
When I leave a review, I just like to say, this is what this story was generally about. This is another author that it reminded me of.
Yeah.
And, the whole
Yeah.
thing held together. And I just leave it like
Yeah.
that because
Exactly.
what you like about a story is not necessarily what I'm going to like about that story.
True.
And there is
True.
no objective way of saying this is a terrible thing for all people in all places. So,
True. Yeah. I always write reviews only if I like something, and I only write about what I like. That's
yeah.
just what I do with my reviews. And that's true of really, I mean, even when it comes to products in general, unless a product like something I buy on Amazon that's actual product, that like a, I don't know, like trying to think of like a table, let's say.
Tide.
Unless it was an awful, like, oh my goodness, it's missing some serious parts and it's an awful product, and should be, unless it's something like that,
Mhm.
I don't bother. It's either a good review or nothing. But
Right,
we
right.
could go on all that night about reviews, and we don't want to bore our listeners, so we
No,
don't
no,
want
no.
to
This
do
is
that.
this is so inside baseball. Like people are just
we got,
not that interested.
I got carried away. But so your most recent book is Leave No Trace. What are your other two books?
So the one that came out before Leave No Trace is called The Only Song Worth Singing. Both of those are dark fantasy, but with a pop culture element. There's musicians involved in both. And the one prior to that came out in 2022, but then was reissued with a new cover and more fresh content in 2024 is called Tune In Tomorrow. And that is a funny, silly, again, pop culture fantasy about a reality TV show run by mythical creatures for mythical creatures, but starring humans. So it really lets me satirize the whole industry. And as an entertainment journalist, I know how the sausage gets made. I've been backstage and I try to put a lot of that in the book. And if anybody has read that or thinks they want to read it and would maybe want to get more, I've got another one coming out in March in that universe, in the Tune In Tomorrow universe, again about the Fae and pop culture and what TV shows and movies would they be making and what would that. So that's another silly one that's coming out in March.
Very cool. Um, so might be a stretch, but I'm going to throw it out there. If you were going to compare your work to another author that's well known, or maybe
Oh.
just authors that you especially enjoy yourself, just to give
Mhm.
people kind of a basis for common ground, I mean, who would you compare yourself to, or who do you especially enjoy reading? Either one of those questions, either direction.
Yeah, that's always a tough one. So I like to think, and I am not in no way comparing myself to these authors, just that I've read a lot of them, and I'm sure that I have been influenced enough. I have read a lot of Stephen King, and we all think of him as the master of horror and all of that, but it's not so much about the content of Stephen King that I think I'm drawing on. I was influenced very early on about by his style, the way he gets into people's heads, the way he's very strong developing character, and he uses the staccato of paragraphs and actual structure of sentences to create a mood. And he's not the only author who does this, but he's the one that I sort of unintentionally studied. And when I sat down to write, I realized that I was writing a little bit like he does.
Okay.
I am a huge fan of the author Jonathan Carroll, who does magical realism. He's an American, but he lives in Vienna, and he does this wonderful thing where he will capture reality in such a crystal clear, almost hyper real way. But then he'll throw in like a talking dog and it'll make sense. Like it just makes sense. Or he'll have
Yeah.
a VHS tape player that the tape plays the future. So he has these elements that just tie it all together, and he's very philosophical in some ways. I mean, some of the I've been reading his books sometimes, and I'll read a sentence and I'll just have to stop and look around me and be like, that is so profound, or that is so on point, or that just speaks to my heart.
Yeah.
So I don't think I'm anywhere near as good as him, but I certainly aspire to having a deeper level than just storytelling in the story, that I want there to be some discussion of bigger pictures, whether it's a
Yeah.
funny book where I get to talk about immortality, or a darker fantasy in which we get to explore the importance of what is there human magic. Like, is friendship, is music a form of human magic? And I don't mean to make it sound like it's a My Little Pony episode or anything, but I do, in the context of the story that I'm trying to tell, especially with The Only Song Worth Singing, that's what they have to battle the magical creatures with. They don't have spells, but they have something that is a very powerful force of their own, which if they learn how to channel it, can hopefully defeat the creatures that are coming after them. So that was
Sure.
really important, and that, I think, probably that thinking comes out of Jonathan Carroll. And then another author who I very much like in terms of the way he does humor is Terry Pratchett. So he's kind of known as a master of humorous science fiction fantasy, and he has this whole world called Discworld, and it's a flat world, and it's being held up by turtles. And the books that he writes, there's no one particular order. He wrote dozens and dozens of books that take place in Discworld, but you don't have to read them in any particular order. They might reference one another or take place in the same town, but I liked that concept, not just his style of being funny and satirical, but also that style of putting out books, because both of the series of books that I have, or that I'm working on, are all, at the moment at least, completely independent. They're under their own umbrellas, so they relate, but there's no order you have to read anything in.
That's
And
nice.
that's how I like to read books anyway. I don't mind reading a series, but
Hmm.
so often a series is not finished or doesn't get finished for various publishing reasons. And I don't want to have to wait 3 years and then have to remember what I read 3 years ago to read part two and part three. So, I think you can tell a big picture story over multiple books, but you can chop it up into bits that are also standalone and work on their own merits.
There
So
is
that's
something to be
something
said for
that,
that.
yeah. So anyway, that's those I would say are probably three authors. I'm sorry to say that I haven't named any female authors, but those are the
That's
first three.
okay. I mean, those are strong role models, and the components that they're all that you're emulating, and that's what I was asking. Just and if there's no females, well, that is what it
Well,
is.
I do
You're the
like a lot of
female in
female
that
authors.
group.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm trying to stick to the cause. It's more women writers, right? Yeah, those are the first three that come to mind.
And that's quite all right. I understand that we girls got to stick together, but sometimes it's just your role models are your role models, and you know we
That's
no
right.
harm,
That's
no
what it
foul.
is. Well, thank you.
No problem. So as we as we start to wind down toward the end of our program, I think I had forewarned you that I always have a previous guest leave a random question for a future guest. And if I didn't, then I apologize. But my last guest was a musician, and his question for you. Let's see if I can spot my notebook here. His question is, oh yes, okay. You are shipwrecked on a desert island, and for the next 30 years, you can only listen to one CD that you happen to pack with you. What CD, what artist are you listening to?
So limited. I got excited about the shipwreck question because I have thought about this. But I've always thought of it as like one band. Like if you could have the whole
Okay.
band's
Well,
who would you pick? But one
let's
CD
add
is
that
like,
component to
that's
it.
tough.
Let's do both. Let's do both
um,
sides of that equation.
okay. So the pre answer that I had already thought about on my own time. I looked at all the artists that I love because I'm a huge music fan. I used to be a music journalist and everything, and I have lots of music. Um, but I was thinking about, I want quantity as well as quality. Like, if I'm going to be there 30 years, I don't want to listen to the same 7 or 8 songs, right? So I have favorite bands, but not necessarily liking every single one of their songs over the years.
Yeah.
But I am a huge Pet Shop Boys fan. And
Oh, they're
Pet Shop
good.
Boys have been regularly putting out albums, most of which I like since the 80s. So there is an
Mhm.
enormous amount of music I could take with me. And they also have a
Right.
wonderful variety of sounds. And when we think of them, if you think of them as like an electronic band or a dance band or a club band, but they actually have some wonderful, meaningful ballads and some lyrics that just really, oh, they just grab me every time I hear them. So I would absolutely bring every single thing the Pet Shop Boys ever made onto this island with me. But a big part of the why is that there's so much volume there, so you're not going to get tired. As
That's a
for
pretty
an
good answer.
album, it's tough because you're going to get unless you can think of like a double album, you're going to get anywhere like maybe 10 songs tops, and it
True.
doesn't matter who they are or how much you like them. They're going to wear thin quickly, I think.
True. So let's say it's
So
an
you
album
want
that has
songs.
20. Let's say it has 20. Or that
Well, I
let's
would
assume it
probably
is a
go.
double album.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would probably go for a greatest hits collection, which is kind of cheap, but you get volume on those, and often you can get a double album version. And I think that I was not as big a Billy Joel fan until his greatest hits volume 1 and 2 came out.
Okay. Yeah.
And there were songs on there that I had never heard before, and I love his stuff. Maybe it's not the coolest thing, but I love Billy Joel, and his songs I've been listening to since I was very young. And yes, I would go with Billy Joel's greatest hits 1 and 2. Again, get a lot of songs, get a lot of quality, not tired.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, because I asked him, the guy who asked the original question, like, do you want me to answer this while I'm with you here? And I actually
Uh-huh.
answered very similarly to you. I did answer Billy Joel myself, a different album specifically, but like you, he was actually as far as my musical upbringing, he was my first love. Like the first songs I
you know
loved as a child were Billy Joel. So right there with you on
which
that.
so which album? Is it the Nylon Curtain, or you had a different idea?
I would have chosen The River of Dreams if I was going to choose only one album of his. I just really love
Okay.
that particular album, but I love everything. Almost, I would say I love 99% of Billy Joel's music.
Okay.
So that's
And
as high a
I'm
score as I give.
assuming you've seen the HBO documentary.
The recent one, the new one that came out, because I
Yeah.
don't think I've seen
Yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah. Like
I'm
three
aware of it, but I
parts.
haven't
You
seen
you
it yet.
must. You must sit yourself down, get ready to have a treat. It is a fabulous documentary.
I'm gonna have to make it a point, but no, I was aware of it, but I have not done that yet. But
Okay.
yeah, I will always have a soft spot for Billy Joel. Oh,
Why not?
good stuff.
Good guy.
Hmm. Yeah, very much so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
And
could
quite a
listen to
storyteller,
him
by the way.
all
He
day
is
long.
he's such a great
Mhm.
storyteller. I mean, people who don't know, is it Miami 2017? Like people who don't know Miami 2017, I've seen the lights go down on Broadway. Like that's a song about the apocalypse. You don't expect that from Billy Joel, and yet it's a great catchy tune. So
Yeah.
here we are.
Well, and I think that's the beauty of him too. Is he's so versatile. He does such a variety of
Hmm.
music. He's a
Yeah.
storyteller, but he's always changing his style. He always finds a way to stay current. Even if he chose to come out with a song this year, I know it would be something just a whole different style and unique, and I would probably love it because it's Billy Joel.
Right. Exactly.
But yeah, but he's an amazing storyteller and an amazing artist, and yeah, I could never get bored with him.
Yeah, I
So
agree with that 100%.
yeah. So did you have a chance, or can you think of anything in this moment for the next guest that will be appearing?
So I don't know what the next guest would be, like what their expertise is. So I'll
Doesn't
keep it
matter.
fairly
It's
general.
a
But
yep, random question.
yeah, what is the one project that you still want to do? Like what if you're a writer, like what is the one book you still want to put out, or what is the one song you haven't written yet, or what is the one company or product that you still want to create? Like, what is that thing that's sitting in the back of your mind going, one of these days? And what's it going to take to get you to get to that, to put that out?
One of these days. And what will it take to get there? I like that. That's a nice in-depth question.
Good. Is your cat nearby, by the way?
Yeah, I have 2 cats and a dog, and there's this one that's right here on the edge, right there. Hello,
Yep.
Orlando.
A little bit of tail action while you were looking down. It was very funny.
Yeah, they ignore me for a good chunk of the day, but they see me come up for a podcast. They're like, "Ooh, let's come sit here beside you and see if we can swish and do
That's
stuff
right.
with the audience."
Exactly.
Meanwhile,
Look
the
at
other one's sitting
me.
on the
Don't look at that
couch.
camera.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So sometimes they walk directly in front of the camera, but he's been on good behavior so far.
Yes.
But yes,
Yes.
he decided to, I guess, sneak in that tail appearance there. So,
A special
Orlando
guest
and Dawn,
appearance
ladies and
by.
gentlemen. Exactly. Their names are Orlando and Dawn, like the artist Tony Orlando and Dawn.
I was about to say, I have to ask then if that's what that is, because I was a fan of a lot of their work also.
Yep. And it just seemed to suit them. So yeah, Orlando and Dawn. I
love it.
like things that are a little on the unique side, and since they were siblings and a pair, and no one ever names their animals Orlando and Dawn, so I had to go there.
Exactly. Well, I'm very fond of Dawn in general, so.
Very nice. All right. Well, I really appreciate you coming today. So we're going to stop the broadcast here, but just for our audience that does not get to see the video and cannot see the website of randeedawn.com, Randee spelled Randee, Randee Dawn, DAWN.com, and ZoeyMichaels.com for my website for those who aren't already aware. Just want to make sure that our audio listeners actually are aware of those websites, because I'm sure there's a wealth of information on randeedawn.com about your books and about your projects. And I would assume your books are available on Amazon and probably some other platforms.
Yeah, pretty much all good booksellers. I do encourage people to use independent booksellers. Go to your local store and order it, or go on bookshop.org and order it. But yes, they are available on Amazon. If that's your best platform, Barnes and Noble often carries a lot of them. And we were talking earlier, for example, about the benefit of reviews. Going into a bookstore, ordering it from a smaller shop not only helps the shop, but it actually helps the author, because a lot of these bigger shops will not carry certain books. So if you can take the extra step and do that, then you have my heart, and thank you very much for doing it.
Very good advice, and that's something I need to work on, getting my book into these smaller shops too, or at least making them aware of me. So thank you for that advice, even on my level. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to stop the recording right about here. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.